Today's verse is John 10, verses 10 and 11. The thief comes only to kill and steal and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I think too often as Christians and as churches, like the world around us, we can dwell on the fear and legalism reflected in the first part of that verse. The thief and the stealing and the killing and the destruction in the first half of that reading, not the promise of life and living life to the full in the second. Now we know from 1 John 4:18 that perfect love casts out fear, but quite often in the culture that we're in, we find ourselves drawn into fear and legalism. Now, in this section of the Bible, in this chapter, in this verse, Jesus is addressing the Pharisees. When he talks to them, he makes some other bold claims as well. He says, I know my sheep and my sheep know me. He says that he is the gate and that all that have come before him are thieves and robbers. It's a direct claim for his authority and his authenticity as a good shepherd are wrapped up in that analogy. And in the verses around today's reading, he also uses some very strong language. He says to the Pharisees that those who preach a different gospel to him are wolves. I kind of find in my life, quite often I can focus on the things that make me and those around me fearful. Or, like the Pharisees, upon law and legal doctrine, over relationship, over knowing my shepherd. But as we go into Advent, a period when we focus on Jesus and his incarnation, his becoming flesh among us, maybe it's time for us not to dwell in the fear and the judgment that far too often pervades our culture. Maybe it's time to listen not to those voices that seek to make us scared and fearful or that point our failings, but also to put instead those things on God. As it says in Peter, to cast all our anxieties on him because he cares for us. Maybe instead in Advent, moving away from that fear and that judgment, we're actually called to dwell in the promises of Jesus in the second part of that verse. The promise of life and life to the full. The promise of relationship with Jesus our shepherd. Maybe as we kind of work out our faith through Advent, that's where we need to be, to cast aside our anxieties, to focus in on Jesus in the flesh, and actually in that relationship to understand more about what it means to have life and to have it to the full. So in Advent, as we pray and ponder what it means for Christ to come among us as a human in the flesh, I would pray that we could put aside our fears and anxieties, set aside our judgments of others and of ourselves, and instead focus on our relationship with God, the Good Shepherd, with Jesus, with the promise of life and of life to the full.